Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Showcase Virtual 2022. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you all for joining us. Now presenting is Nadav Kidron, Chairman and CEO of Oramed. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is ORMP on Nasdaq. And with that, Nadav, take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here today. It's our first time being in this conference, so we are very excited to be here. And as it's the first time, I'm sure many of you have not heard our story, so we are excited to share our story with you. So Oramed in a snapshot. So Oramed has got a platform technology that allows us to take injection and deliver them orally. The company is now probably in our most exciting time since we were created in 2006. We have a very strong financial position of $160 million in cash. There's no debt, and there's a lot of interesting things that are coming up our way, and we're looking forward to sharing those with you. So the biggest thing, and I want to start with that because that's the biggest elephant in the room, we started working on oral insulin. And the idea is that using our technology, using Oromed's technology, you can take insulin and deliver it orally in a pill. We worked through preclinical phase 1, phase 2A, phase 2B, phase 3. And in January, this coming January, we're going to have the readout from our phase 3 on oral insulin. So these are very, very exciting days for us as it's really around the corner. So I will elaborate and focus a lot about the oral insulin, but I wanted to start off with that, and then we can go into more details. The other thing that happened in the previous quarter is that we got some NASH data, and we got some Oravax data, and we're looking forward also to share more GLP data and more Oravax data, which I will elaborate soon, in the coming months, as well as the oral insulin readout. So how does our technology work? So if we were going to take insulin and to swallow it, it's not going to get into the bloodstream because there are two obstacles. There's the issue of degradation, and there's the issue of the molecular size of the insulin that does not allow it to go through the gut wall into the bloodstream. Oromed's technology basically overcomes those two obstacles by developing our own protease inhibitor. We're able to put the insulin, and it's not only the insulin. I want to re-emphasize that what we have is a platform technology that we can take many, many peptides, small proteins, put them in our capsule, and using our technology, we can deliver them orally, because what we do is we put an enteric coating, which is a coating that's pH sensitive, and we put our proprietary protease inhibitor that protects from the degradation. So when someone swallows it, it goes intact through the body and only dissolves after it went through the stomach, and then it goes through the gut wall into the portal vein. And this is a very important point. Our insulin goes first pass into the liver. So let's just take a little bit of an overview of what is going on with us right now with Oramed. So we're having our oral insulin, which we're about to get the readout of the first phase 3, which is the larger one, and will be followed by the second phase 3. We're also working on oral insulin for NASH. We announced successful, positive results just recently. We had a webinar where we shared in depth about the results of the NASH. There's a nice recording of it, so anybody who wants to go and to learn more about it, please refer to that recording. And we're also working on oral GLP-1 analog. On top of that, we also have a daughter company that has the technology to be utilized for oral vaccines. So we're working on oral COVID-19 vaccines, but again, it's a platform technology that can take vaccines and deliver them orally. So let's start with oral insulin. Unfortunately, we live in the world that 1 in 10 adults on the planet have diabetes. And as we grow older, the number only increases. Diabetes is one of the biggest issues that us as human beings we have to face. And the oral insulin, we believe, can suggest a new way, a better way to treat those diabetics. The fact that we deliver it orally versus an injection, it's not only about the patient's compliance. it's also a more physiological way to deliver the insulin. And this is the slide that explains it. And this is very important. When someone injects insulin, goes directly into the bloodstream. Basically, the insulin is getting into the bloodstream and deals with the accumulation of glucose in the bloodstream. When we give it orally, it goes to the portal vein, and from there it goes into the liver. The reason that it's so important to deliver the insulin into the liver, because we can signal to the liver that there's too much glucose in the body, and then the liver, who produces too much, an excessive amount of glucose, knows to shut off that production of glucose by the liver. So we're able to lower the glucose level, not by dealing in the periphery when it already gets to the bloodstream, but by giving it to the liver and stopping the production of the glucose already at the liver level. That is a major thing, because it's not only easier to take it, it's a better way to take it, and can potentially, by giving it earlier to patients before they become insulin dependent, we can keep them healthier for a longer time, and we can potentially save a lot of the costs that we spend currently, last year about $600 billion on diabetes, by giving them oral insulin as an earlier treatment. So the oral insulin can work both for the type 2, which is 90 to 95% of the total diabetic population, but also for type 1, because of that portal delivery, because the liver is being deprived from insulin. We want to give it to both type 1 and type 2, but this specific phase 3 that we're dealing with right now is actually type 2, so I'm going to skip on some of the type 1, which you're welcome to watch. This presentation is actually on our website, and you can watch it at any point in time. Also mention, anybody wants to get the updates from us, you can log onto our website, put in your email address, and you'll be getting the updates directly from us as they happen. So what are we doing with oral insulin for type 2? So when we tried it for the first time to show statistical significant results, we gave 180 patients to take the oral insulin for a period of 28 days. And we did this entire trial in the United States. And what we were able to see is the following. Number one, there are no issues with safety when we give our oral insulin. But what you can see very clearly from here is that on the efficacy side, there's a clear differentiation, a statistical significant differentiation between the lowering of the glucose for those who took the oral insulin, the active, to those who got the placebo. We were very encouraged with the results, and then we moved into a phase 2B, which was done entirely in the United States. It enrolled almost 300 patients, and they took the oral insulin for 90 days in order to show the effect on the hemoglobin A1C. We had a dose escalation from 8 mg a day, 16 mg a day, until 96 mg a day, and we saw something which is quite impressive. Again, no issues with safety, and that has to do also with the delivery into the liver. The liver can take a lot of insulin, and there's no safety issues. So that's why we're talking about a very, very safe way to deliver the insulin. But what we saw on the efficacy when we gave it for 90 days was quite impressive. The overall average on the lower doses were a reduction, placebo adjusted, of about 0.8 in the A1C levels after 90 days, which is remarkable. When we looked at the people who actually started with a higher level of A1C, 9 and up, the reduction was 1.4%. Okay, so someone who started with 9 A1C when they got enrolled into the trial, 90 days later, with no side effects, they basically had 7.6 A1C. So we were very, very excited about these results. And what we decided to do is to take the winners, the 8 milligrams once a day and twice a day, and move into a phase 3. So what we agreed with the FDA is that we're going to do 2 phase 3s. The first one, and the larger one, will have about 675 subjects. We already announced that we enrolled 700 subjects into this trial. and we're going to give them the oral insulin, 8 milligrams once a day, twice a day, and the placebo. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to continue what we did with our phase 2. And this one, we're going to give it to patients, like in real life, that are already taking other glucose-lowering agents. So that's the larger trial of the phase 3. The second phase 3 is very, very much similar. The only difference is that they're only on monotherapy or just with metformin. So we're taking naive patients and we give it to them more as a first line rather as a third line before they go to become insulin-dependent patients. Along with that, what we did is we hired a Covia to do a market research and to really see what the potential, although it naturally feels obvious that people would want to administer the oral insulin. When we spoke to a group of endos and PCPs, we got the very, very interesting results of this study. Basically, 85% of them said that they were willing or interested to prescribe our oral insulin to their patients. So we can see that the acceptance and the demand for the product is already there. And given the high safety profile of our oral insulin, we feel very confident that once we're able to show results as we were able to see in our phase 2B, we're talking about a drug that is very much needed for those hundreds of millions of diabetics out there. So where are we as far as the timeline? Next month, we're going to have the readout of our phase 3, the big phase 3 with 700 patients. We're going to have the readout in January. That will be followed with the readout from the second phase 3. And afterwards, we will be able to submit the BLA. We're going to wait for the BLA to go live. And then at the end of 24, potentially 25, may glitch into 25, we should get the approval by the FDA to market the oral insulin in the United States. We've done a few deals around the oral insulin. The first one was done with a Chinese company that produces insulin. And the way we structured the deal is that they got the license to sell the oral insulin in China. In return, they're going to pay Oramed $50 million in a few milestone payments. $33 million were already received. And they're going to pay for the cost of going through the regulatory path in China, doing the phase 3 in China, which they're doing. And once they start sales, after they invest all the funds needed in order to produce at a full scale the oral insulin, Oramed is entitled to get 10% royalties from their net sales. So that's one deal. The other deal that we did, and it will be updated on the presentation soon, is with a Korean company that they got the rights for Korea. They will be the exclusive distributor in Korea, and they're going to buy the capsules from Oramed. So Oramed will profit in 3 different ways. There's going to be milestone payments, which we got some of them already. There are going to be transfer prices on the cost of the capsule that we're going to sell at a profit to our Korean partner. And then Oramed is also entitled to get additional milestone payments and royalties from their net sales in Korea. That's so much as the big picture with the oral insulin. As far as the NASH, as I mentioned before, we had an open label 90-day trial, and the results were extremely positive. Now, the reason that it makes a lot of sense to put the two together is because we're taking the same oral insulin and we're going to the same diabetic population. We have to remember that about 70% of the people who actually suffer from NASH, 70% of the diabetics do have NASH. So there is a total correlation between being a diabetic to having NASH. And by giving oral insulin that can benefit not only the A1C and the glucose level, but can also benefit those patients on their NASH and the fatty liver, that gives another extra interest for those patients to administer this oral insulin. We've also been working on a GLP-1 analog, an oral version of it. And as we mentioned before, we will update on some of the earlier on clinical trials that we're doing, but they're going to show a very clear proof of concept of delivering, which is a much smaller than insulin, the GLP-1. You can see here some of the results. And now we want to talk a little bit about the daughter company, Oravax. So Oravax stands for oral vaccine. And what we did with Oravax, we did a joint venture with Primas Biotech out of India. Primas developed a COVID vaccine that works on a few parts. And by taking that vaccine, it should be good against the variants as well. And Oramed, by putting the Oramed's technology into this joint venture, basically is entitled to get royalties and sub-licensing fees and sales milestone. But Oramed also happens to be the largest shareholder in that company. Now, the reason that the oral vaccine is so attractive is because this vaccine is easy and cheap to produce, but it's also logistically much easier to give and to administer the oral vaccine, because when you think about it, you don't need a professional to give an injection. Anyone can take it anywhere. So that makes it much easier. You don't need it to be at a freezer temperature. And we know that it's a safer route to take things orally versus just taking it as an injection. There's already 2 deals that we announced for Oravax. One is with one of the largest companies in South America, Genoma Lab, that they are working on taking it through the regulatory path in Mexico and South America, and then to get the rights to market it there. And also with 10 Pharma from Vietnam, that they already pre-ordered 10 million COVID-19 vaccine, and they have milestone payments to pay as we move forward in the process. We got the initial data, phase 1, which in place in South Africa. And over the next few weeks, we should be getting the data from the last patient or last subjects who are running the trial in South Africa. So cohort A are done, and we're waiting for cohort B in the next few weeks. In general, the way we look at Oravax is a platform technology company that will take different vaccines, not only COVID, and will put them in an oral version, and we'll be able to deliver them. And when we saw the success with oral insulin and we saw how well the platform technology works, it's a no-brainer to bring it to more and more drugs beyond what our core competency is. The managing team is full with a lot of people with tremendous amount of experience. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this because we're running a little bit out of time, and we want to make sure that there's time for some questions as well. The last person to join us is Michael Rabinowitz, who came after 25 years at Merck, and he is the Chief Commercial Officer based out of the United States and really leading all these BD efforts out of there. We have a very strong board of directors, including also the CEO and chairman of Merck Life Science Israel. And we have a very strong scientific advisory board that is comprised out of some of the names in the world of diabetes. And also I will note that Professor Avraham Hershko, the Nobel Prize winner, who's closely involved with Oramed, we're very lucky to have him on our board as well. So if I have to sort of summarize what it is that we have a platform technology that can take injections and deliver them orally. Our lead candidate is oral insulin, and in a few weeks from today, we're going to have a readout of our phase 3. It's a very exciting times for us, and it's very exciting times for the world of diabetes. So we're looking forward to sharing that as soon as we get that data. We have about $160 million, according to our last report, in cash and no debt to the company. We burn about $30 million a year, so there's a very strong cash position for Oramed. And we have a lot of very, very exciting milestones, including as we are dealing and potentially looking into more additional licensing deals beyond the one that we did. And the anticipation is that once we get the data from our phase 3, that will be the best time for us to see what is the best route on the BD side in order to realize the value for our shareholders. So I want to thank you for taking the time. I want to thank you for inviting us to present at this conference. And I will end now so we have some time for additional questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nadav, very much for your presentation here today. You know, my first question for you, for those that may not be familiar with the Oramed story, what would you say makes the technology unique and different compared to maybe some others that are also trying to disrupt this industry?
So we're very lucky that our scientist and our chief scientific officer is my mother. That's how I got to start the company with her about 17 years ago. She used to work in the field for 30 years with many smaller and bigger companies. And with technology, you have to be at the right time, at the right place in order to be able to bring the right technology to where it needs to be. And when you look at the results of what we have, you see that it works. So there are some other companies who try to work on oral delivery, but to the best of my knowledge, there's nobody else in the world who is at the point of a readout from a phase 3 on oral insulin.
Absolutely. And also let's give even a little more context for, you know, for those that may not have somebody who has diabetes in their life, you know, how difficult it can be to inject insulin versus potentially some alternatives. You know, why is this something that, you know, based on your research and based on everything that you have going on that at Oramed, why this is something that folks want versus having to inject it all the time?
So there's a few reasons why we're able to see when we did the market research, when we had interviews to potential patients and doctors and payers, that there's such a strong demand for oral insulin because there's tremendous amount of fear from the needles. People say, I don't want to inject. And they don't want to inject because they're afraid of the needle and also because the needle means that they're diabetic. Although they're diabetic even beforehand, they want to feel that they can take a pill because we all take pills. And they feel that the moment that they find them as diabetics is once they start to inject. So if we can offer insulin orally that they can take much earlier, before the point that they become insulin dependent, there's a huge, huge, huge need for that.
And then another question I have for you, having to do with the deal with, what was the name of the company that you did the deal with in China again? It was
HDIT.
Got it. How did that all come about? And are these similar deals that you're going to be looking to accomplish prior to, you know, presenting the readouts and the data to the FDA?
So HDIT invested about $400 million in a very modern insulin facility. So we're able to produce insulin. And when they heard about the Oramed's technology, it made a lot of sense for them to actually deliver their insulin orally instead of in an injection. So we have conducted a very lengthy negotiation in order to get a deal done. We weren't so rushing to do a deal in China on the one hand. On the other hand, China is the easiest slice to slice away from the cake because it's so separate, it's a world of its own. And we did it much earlier on. We did it in December 2015. And at that point in time, when we didn't even have the phase 2 readout to get those amounts of money, and as I said, up to date, we already got $33 million from the deal, and there's another $17 million to be getting, depending on some milestone. I think it was a very successful deal between the West and China, and it's very strategic because they have the insulin facility and they have the ability to basically increase the capacity over there so they can produce the entire oral insulin in their facilities right there in China.
Absolutely. And can you give any color on the deal that you also mentioned during your presentation with Korea?
So Korea obviously is a much smaller territory, and we structured the deal a little bit differently. What we put out so far is that they gave $2 million just for a no-shop, so because they wanted to negotiate the deal, and then under the no-shop, we negotiated the deal, and just a few weeks ago we signed on it. And the idea is that because it's a small territory, they're not going to have their own production facilities in Korea. So we're using our CMO. We're going to sell them the capsule at the profit, and we are also going to get the royalties, and there's also milestone payments along the way. So those are two different models that can benefit Oramed shareholders by selling the oral insulin to what I would call the further out territory. Obviously, as we get closer, the US is the most lucrative territory, but also Japan, Europe, and so on are also very, very interesting territories that the longer we wait, the more we can get value for those territories.
Absolutely. So Nadav, I've known the company for many years now, and I know you've done the rounds, you've gone to, conferences like this one, you've done the investor meetings and whatnot. What would you say then are some of the most frequently asked questions that you still get, and maybe we can address them right here?
So one question that people ask, what will be a successful come out of the phase 3? And the answer is very simple. If we're going to show on the phase 3 what we showed on a phase 2B, that will be a successful phase 3. And the surveys that we ran with Acovia, when we interviewed 150 patients, payers, and so on and so forth, we showed them the model of a phase 2B results. So that's number one. That's a very important question to understand. In a few weeks, we're going to have a readout of phase 3, and we're going to know exactly much more about this technology as we're going to get this data out. The other question that we're being asked frequently is, what is the ideal time for you to do licensing deals? And because we have the financial strength that we could carry the phase 3 on the burden of the phase 3 on our shoulders, on Oramed shoulders, the longer we wait, the more we're going to get value for the oral insulin. So that's why I believe that once we're going to show the results of the phase 3, which we don't know them yet, but we will know them in a few weeks, and assuming the results are positive, I think it will put us in a very strong position and at the right time in order to do more BD deals in even more lucrative territories.
Absolutely. And final question for you here today, and this I'm asking to all the companies that are presenting, we're going through tough markets right now. What would you say are some of the measures the company is taking to mitigate some of those macroeconomic pressures that are happening right now?
So I'm going to reiterate the fact that Oramed has $160 million in cash, and we burn about $30 million a year. It doesn't happen by itself. It's because throughout the years, we kept a very thin overhead. The cost, most of the cost that we spend in the $30 million is passed through to a CRO, CMO, and so on and so forth. We kept Oramed very, very thin, and that allows us to actually move forward without spending crazy amounts of money and without any need to raise money for the next time being. And I think we're very lucky that we're entering these difficult times with this cash, with no debt, and with this burn rate.
Very good. Well, Nadav, we're there. Thank you so much for your presentation here today, as well as answering a few of my questions to everybody watching. Thank you for engaging and participating as well, and have a great rest of your conference. Nadav, thank you again.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.